especially want to thank the young ladies for helping to lead us in worship with that special music. If we view the song as a prayer, I believe it's going to be answered today. God wants to take us deeper. He wants our faith to grow stronger. And I believe He has a specific message for us in that regard today. Do you remember how you learned things as a kid? Now, I'm going to step away from my mic for a second. Sometimes you will discover I like to be active. Standing still is hard for me. And I sat in the car for a couple hours coming here this morning, so I'm antsy. Got to walk a little bit. That's right, just like that. You got it. So, do you remember how you learned things, or think about something specific? Think about something specific that you learned as a child. Now, maybe it was to play an instrument. And if you were learning to play an instrument as a child, let me tell you, your parents remember it real well. They remember some of those noises that came out of it when you were practicing. Do you remember how you learned to ride a bicycle? How many people know how to ride a bicycle? Yeah. Do you remember how you learned? I remember how I learned. I had a good brother. He says, I'm going to teach you to learn how to ride a bicycle. I said, oh, that's good. So he held the bike still, and he showed me how to put my foot on the pedal and swing my other leg up, and I got on the bicycle. That was fine. We were standing still. He was holding the bicycle. He said, now it's time to go forward. And so there was this little downhill. Oh, no. Hell no was right. So he starts pushing the bicycle. He says, hold the steering wheel straight. I held it straight. He said, here we go. He pushes me. He says, I'm going to let go now. Well, what was I supposed to do? Say no? Too late. I'm on the bicycle. So he gives it a shove. He told me to hold the steering wheel straight. I held it straight. Everything went well for about 10 feet. I noticed at the bottom of this little decline was a tree. Ooh. He didn't tell me anything about the tree. He hadn't taught me how to, steer the bicycle. And the last thing he had told me was to hold the wheel straight. I held it straight. The tree got closer. I held it straight. I remember that front tire hitting the tree. Bang! The bicycle stopped. I didn't. I kept going and hit the trunk of the tree. Believe it or not, I learned to ride a bicycle after that. After my brother picked me up off the ground and said, oh, you're not hurt too bad. I'm the one who just hit a tree, not him. Yeah, that's how I learned to ride a bicycle. Now, there are some other things that I learned as a child, but I don't really remember how I learned. I somewhere along the way, I learned something about tithing. Tithing. What does tithe mean? 1/10. That's what it means. Nothing fancy. 1/10. And somewhere along the line, I suspect that my mother must have sat me down when my father gave me an allowance. And maybe it was $1. Now that, back in the day, $1 these days, you almost don't even stop to pick up $1. But back in the day, if I sound like an old man now, back in the day, $1 was a lot of money. And if they gave it to me as allowance, maybe my mother lined it up as dimes, 10 dimes. And said, well, here's 10 dimes, but you need to give one of those dimes back to Jesus. Well, why do I need to do that? Well, because it's His, and He asked you to give a tithe. He does? Yeah, He does. Okay. So, next day at church, I probably took that dime and stuck it in the offering plate. Now, I don't know if that's what happened. I really don't. Because my memory has failed me. But I cannot remember a time in my life where I didn't know that I was supposed to tithe on the money that was given to me back to God. Now, it's interesting how some of these lessons we learn, we don't forget. Have you ever forgotten how to ride a bicycle? Now, I haven't said, by the way, are you unable to ride the bicycle anymore? That's different. But have you ever forgotten how to ride the bicycle? I don't think so. I remember coming back from a vacation once with my parents. And the first thing I wanted to do was to jump on my bicycle and ride around the cul-de-sac that our house was on. Well, why? My mother wanted to know. Well, I wanted to see if I'd forgotten how to ride my bicycle. Amazing, I hadn't forgotten. And yay, 40 years later, I can still ride a bicycle, even if it's been years since I've actually gotten on a bicycle. I haven't forgotten. It's the same thing as I relate to this tithe business, of giving something back to God. In fact, and it's not just me, it's others. I know of a young man, he went away to college, and he didn't necessarily live life the way that he'd been taught as a child, or at least in conformity with his parents' beliefs. And he adopted some lifestyle issues that weren't exactly the best for him, or healthy for him, or ones that his parents would approve of. And he had taken a job as a bartender. Well, as a bartender, as you serve people their drinks, they give you tips in cash. And this young man did something very interesting every night when he came home. And I know this story to be true because I know his roommate who told me this story. And this young man would come in at maybe 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning. And many times he himself wasn't just serving drinks, he would have been drinking himself. And so he became rather inebriated. And that's just a fancy word for saying he was drunk. And so he'd come in and kind of stumble through the doorway and maybe bang against the wall. He would go over, though, to his dresser where he had a jar. And he would put his tip money in there, or at least almost all of his tip money. There was one thing that he took out, however. It was his tithe. He did remember that even if he had earned this money in ways that probably weren't pleasing to God, he must tithe it. And so he had a separate jar where he might miss a few times, but he would finally get the money into the jar so that he could pay his tithe to God. He had never forgotten, but he had learned. Interesting. He may, though, have been a bit confused as to why he was doing what he was doing. We talked this morning in the adult Sabbath school class that was held here in the sanctuary. We discussed, and someone had brought the comment as to, there were habits, but had we forgotten the motivation behind the habits? Habits are good, right? Most of the time. Habits are good if they are healthy activities. And because what happens then is you don't have to, after you've done them a few times, it takes less energy to do them again, right? And so you're doing something good with less energy. And if something bad comes along and tempts you not to do that, it doesn't take as much energy because you don't have to think about it. It's a habit. Now, the dangerous thing with habits is it's easy to forget why you're doing what you are doing. Many of us here in this room, we practice giving tithes and offerings. It's part of the service. But do we do it out of habit? And we've learned to trust God? Or have we forgotten why we do it? We just know we're supposed to. Let's talk about it a little today. And I'm going to tell you another story. As the boys will tell you, I like stories. And I take a cue from the book of 1 John, chapter 1 and verse 1. John is writing and he has this to say. He says, that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked at, and which our hands have touched. This is what we proclaim concerning the word of life. So this morning I'm going to share a story, and it's going to be from what I have seen, from what I have touched with my own hands. I remember going out to my front yard, and I had a hammer in my hand, and luckily the sign was rather small, and the ground was rather soft, because my hammer wasn't really big enough. And I had to pound this sign into the ground. The year was 1991. That's a long time ago, huh? Yeah, old man. 1991, and so I walk out to the front yard of my house, and I take this hammer, and I take this sign, and I drive the sign into the ground. It was a for sale sign. My wife and I, my wife Cindy, and I lived in South Carolina. And we were a young married couple. We'd been married about 5 years. And we had just the year before been able to buy our first house. Now that's exciting, isn't it? You've rented, you've given your money to other people, but you have nothing more, right? And it's not yours. You can't really do everything you want with it. Maybe you don't even have a yard if you're renting an apartment or something, or a townhouse. So when you have your own house, maybe you have a little bit of a yard. You can plant a garden. You can do some landscaping. You can plant flowers. Yeah, it's a good thing. So we had just bought our house the year before. Now, you have to save money to buy a house. No one just says, "Want a house? Here, buy a house." Yeah, thanks. No, they don't know about it. What do they want? Yeah, they want money, yeah. And you're broke. Well, you're going to have to wait a year or two before you get a house then. And so what happens is, I like you guys up here, man. So we had saved up money for our 5 years of marriage. Not only that, my grandma had given us some money. And so we were able to make a down payment. Now, we didn't pay for the whole house. We had to borrow money for some of it, but we put a down payment on the house. My wife was ecstatic. She had her own house. And so she decorated it. And I liked it too, because it had a living room. It had a big stone fireplace. Now, why in South Carolina, I'm not sure why. Mind you, but whenever the temperature got less than 60 degrees, man, I had a fire in that fireplace. I love fires. Anyway, so we had a big stone fireplace, and I had done some landscaping, and we painted the porch, and we'd done all sorts of stuff. And then, I really wasn't happy with what I was doing. I was working as a public accountant, and but wasn't satisfied doing that. I felt that God was calling me to do something else. And through some circumstances, which I won't relay because it'll make it even longer until we eat lunch. I had felt that God was calling me to begin working for the church and to work in the treasury department. Now, this wouldn't have been so bad for my wife if God had called me to work in South Carolina in the same town where we owned our house. But God sometimes surprises you. He says, "Dave, here I am. I want you to work for me." "Oh, good, excellent, we'll do it. In Minnesota." One more time, please. Minnesota. Ever been to Minnesota?
No, Minnesota. I drink soda.
Yeah, you drink soda. That's not what we're talking about. I'll tell you what. So Minnesota is a state in America, far to the north, and there's lots of snow. About 5 months of the year. And that's not so bad. I like snow. In fact, I like cold weather. I'm sick. I'm sorry. But I like it. And so to me, it was kind of exciting. My wife said, Minnesota. We just bought a house. Yeah, that's true. Housing prices have gone down. That's true too. There were lots of discussions in our house. Lots of conversations, lots of praying, lots of conversations. And over a period of time, we came to the conclusion, my wife included, that was important, that yes, we were to move to Minnesota where I would start working for the church. Well, so I went out and I put a for sale sign up while my wife Cindy cried in the house. And so the truck came and we loaded all our stuff on the truck. We got in the truck, well, not completely, we got in our cars, and we followed the truck to the great north of Minnesota. The house had not sold yet. So we left it in the hands of a realtor, and we moved to Minnesota. We started renting a place, all the time thinking of our house. Now, it seems to me that if you follow God's will, now, wouldn't you expect Him to do good things for you? You know, I read all these bedtime stories. That when you obey God, good things happen. And so, you know, okay, we had to leave our house. We left where our friends, we left where our families lived. We had obeyed God and gone to the far north. And so God is going to sell this house for me, and we're going to make lots of money. In spite of the housing market going like this. Well, 1 month went by. 2 months went by. 3 months went by. Then I get a call from the insurance company. Oh, by the way, we can't really insure your house much longer unless you really pay really high rates because it's vacant. And you could rent your house. Oh, I'm a terrible landlord. Renting a house from 1,500 miles away, and you know, I've heard too many stories of properties being trashed by people, and you're up there, and I didn't have them. That just wasn't going to work. 4 months went by, and so the realtor says, if you want to sell this house, you're going to have to drop the price. We already have it really low. We're going to lose some money already. No, you need to drop the price. There's no one coming to look at your house because you have it too high. Well, we think it's worth this. Well, that's fine, but no one else thinks it's worth that. It's a terrible thing. You can only sell something for what someone else is willing to pay. So we said, okay, we'll lower the price a little bit. So we did just a little bit. Finally, someone came to look at the house, and they said, oh, what a lovely house. My wife says, you bet it's lovely. That's why we bought it. So they said, we're willing to buy this house. Hallelujah, praise the Lord. Thank you, Jesus. We're only willing to pay this much. That's not very much. If we sell the house for that, we're going to lose all the money that we put into the house. So we're not going to have anything left. There were lots of more prayers and discussions in our household. Nothing had been decided. Time was running out. And I remember at work one day, we were kind of thinking through all this, and I had taken my lunch and I had gone into the lunchroom, and I was eating my lunch. And I like to read. You do, very good. So I like to read while I eat. So I'm eating and I'm reading, but I'm not really thinking about what I'm reading. I'm just kind of reading. And surprisingly enough, I picked up this, it was a church magazine of some sort, and it was talking about stewardship. That you're God's steward. In other words, you're in charge of God's goods. That's what a steward does. He's in charge of someone else's, all their properties. And I'm just kind of reading. I'm really thinking about the house. And I'm thinking about my wife and what she's thinking about all this. I just kind of, finally, it was so interesting, I was just kind of glancing through the article, and I saw this one sentence. It said, God owns everything. And I remember at that moment that God spoke to me. Now, was there a drum roll? No. Was there a clap of thunder? No. Did I actually hear anything? No. I didn't get the still small whisper that Elijah got. Yet God spoke to me. You can never convince me otherwise. When God speaks to you, you know it. There's just nothing will shake you from that conviction. And he said this. He says, Dave, it's not yours. I said, but I'm going to lose all my money. He says, it's my money. He said, I gave you that house. He said, and now I want you to sell my house. And I remember going back to my office, picked up the phone, called my wife Cindy. I said, Cindy Lou, I know you're going to think this is strange, but I think God just spoke to me and we need to sell the house. She said, you know, I've come under the same conviction. Hallelujah, thank you, Jesus. You don't understand that yet, but you will. Why's all the husbands laughing at you? Right? Yeah. So we sold the house. We sold the house. We lost all our money. We lost God's money. It was very interesting. I knew the theory already. You know, the theory that God owns everything. I knew that theory. But I never had truly experienced it. See, experience is different than theory. By the way, you know who are the #1 experts on how to raise children? Got it. Say it a little louder.
Those who don't have children.
That's exactly right. Those who don't have children. That's right. I was an absolute expert in child raising until 1994 when my first son was born. And then I became a dithering idiot. Like, oh my goodness, I don't know. I remember bringing him home from the hospital. Where's the directions? Where's the manual? Nothing. They just put my wife in the car with him and said, here you go, good luck. Right. All my expertise in how to raise kids and make them behave. And all this kind of stuff. Yeah. I knew the theory that God owns everything. But I had never had to experience the truth of it. There's a difference. You see, the enemy wants to tempt us into thinking that we're God. Remember? Back in Genesis, what do you tell Adam and Eve?
We'll be like God.
God's not telling you the truth. What God isn't telling you is that you can be God too. And if you just follow my way, you can be God just like Him. And then you can own everything. But it's not true. It's not true. And somehow I got confused with that. And when I try to be God, you know what this means? It means I've turned into a thief. Now, what would you think? Do you have a TV at your house?
Yeah.
Yeah. You like the TV?
Yeah.
Big screen?
Yeah.
Ooh, nice. What's your address? Because I'd like to come visit you. And just before I leave, if you would kind of turn your back, or go back in your room and get something, do something, And I'll leave at that point in time. Now, I can't guarantee your TV is going to be in your house when you come out. Because it sounds like it's very nice, big screen. Probably bigger than the screen I have, so I could use it. Now, is that going to be a problem? Well, why is that going to be a problem? Oh, it belongs to you. And so you're going to call the police and you're going to say, excuse me, officer, I have someone to report because he has just come to my house and he has what? My TV. Yeah, what was your TV? He has stolen my TV. Actually, your parents. Yeah, he's already taken it. Yeah, he's already seen it. It's his. I know how that works. Yeah. In effect, I would have stolen from you. And the reality of it is that when we decide that we own everything, and that it is ours to dispose just as we feel like, we have stolen from God just as assuredly if we had walked into your house and stolen your TV. In fact, that's what the Bible says. You can say, well, that's just what the preacher says. No, it's not just what the preacher says. Because if you look in the Bible, in Malachi chapter 3, verses 7 and 8, it says, will a man rob God? Yet you rob me, God says. Well, you say, well, how have we robbed you? In tithes and offerings. So the reality of it is that God owns everything. And He's asked us to return a little bit of it to Him. Now, why does God ask us to do that? Why does God ask us to do that? Could it be that He wants to take us deeper? He wants to build our trust and our faith? You know, ladies, you sang a beautiful song. It's a gorgeous song. Don't you love the words? You know? We're going to keep our eyes above the waves. We're going to keep our eyes on Jesus. We're going to walk by faith. That's beautiful words. It's the theory. The theory is awesome. How do you learn to experience? We're great on the theory. The reality of it is, God gives us something. You know, every Sabbath we come, and we give, by the way, I'm not pushing, so don't worry. We put something in a tithe offering. We put money in it, right? Do you realize this is the most practical way in any church service to actually learn to have trust in God? Because what are you saying? Is that, God, I believe you're going to take care of me with what is left. I'm not just going to say, I have to take care of myself. It is all up to me. You see, it's how we trust the grace of God. See, grace is very practical. Grace means God's intervention to take care of us. Whether it's to take care of our sin problem, whether it's to take care of our material needs, grace is God intervening on my behalf. By the way, isn't that what Sabbath is all about? Ever thought about that? Saying, oh, you're a legalist to keep Sabbath. No, you're not. You're experiencing God's grace. Rather than running around like a chick with my head cut off for 7 days a week saying, it's all up to me to take care of myself and my family. 1 day a week I'm saying, okay, I'm going to give it to God. Because God says He'll take care of me. Amen. It's called Sabbath rest. If you want to learn to trust God and experience His grace, we enter into Sabbath rest. We return a tithe and an offering to God. Say, I'm going to trust God that you take care of me. And then the theory becomes reality. Is it easy? Yep. Nope. Learning to ride a bicycle wasn't easy too, remember? Cross the road, here comes a tree. It does. I scrape my knee. That's bump on my head. Well, not quite. It was a long time ago. And so we learn, we stumble, sometimes we say, oh, I don't know if I can do that. I better keep some of it back to myself. Oh, I have less now. In fact, I'm worse off. I better trust God. I better trust. It bumps, scrapes, bruises, but it turns theory into reality. And we need it desperately, because here's the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter is portrayed to us in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 7. It says, Paul writes to Timothy, we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. Think about that. You're going to take nothing out of it. I don't care how expensive a casket you buy. I don't care what you put in the casket. If you want proof of it, go look at the Egyptian pharaoh's tombs. They put all their material wealth in there. They put maidservants and menservants, who, by the way, had to die, unfortunately, as a result, to take them with them to the next country. And did it do them a lick of good? No. What did it do? It enriched the explorer who dug into the tombs, found it, and said, looky here, gold and silver. And look at all these skeletons of these servants. Sorry to get too graphic there. The reality of it is we bring nothing into the world. Go to a maternity ward and watch a baby being born. You are born with nothing. You die with nothing. The enemy never tells us that. He says, oh, you could be God. So, God says, you must learn this practical lesson that you own nothing. And the best way I can teach it is to hit you where it hurts. Because you think this is what is sustaining you, and it's not. In fact, very explicitly, in the book of Deuteronomy, we're told that God's purpose in Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 23, it says, so that you may learn to revere the Lord your God. That's what tithing is for. It's what it says. So that you may learn to revere the Lord your God. You say, oh, I want to learn to revere the Lord. I want to do it, but I don't want to do this other. Well, to do that means you put yourself back in God's place. Because you've said, I'm going to learn to revere God in some other way. Ah, that's deciding you know better than God. Interestingly enough, my goodness, this preacher's going long. We got to wrap this thing up. Listen to that tummy start to growl. Interestingly enough, we live in a scientific age, right?
Yep.
We conduct experiments. We form a hypothesis. We think we know what's going to happen. And then we experiment and we record our findings to see if what we have hypothesized has come true. God's not always into the scientific age. In fact, in the Bible, over and over again, he says, do not test me. He gets upset, actually, when people come and they deliberately say, God, I'm going to test you. You need to do this and this, and I challenge you. Hey, God's not really high on that. Except one place. Explicitly, God condemns those who test the Lord your God. Deuteronomy 6:16, do not test the Lord your God. Psalm 78:18, they willfully put God to the test by demanding, not good, bad, but the exception. It's the only place in the Bible. In fact, I will give anybody in this church $1,000, starting with you, young man, if you can find any other place in the Bible where God says it's a good thing to test him. But there is only one place. And by the way, I don't give up $1,000 easily. It's over tithes and offerings. In Malachi 3:10, God says, test me in this. He invites us into the scientific age. He says, test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you will not have room enough for it. Chapter 3, verse 10. for the Bible experience. These guys are ready. They've been practicing that sword drill. Malachi 3:10, go. Yeah. Here's the point. God says, I know that this is going to challenge you, but this is the number one way you're going to trust me. So therefore, test me. You know who the happiest people in the church generally are? It's those who give tithes and offerings with understanding. I say that with understanding. Because the Pharisees tithed without understanding, and they were mean and grumpy and a pain in the rumpus. But those who are the happiest people in the church are those who have learned that God is faithful. And so with great joy, they return a faithful tithe. They give free will offerings. They're claiming this promise of God. And God has poured out blessing after blessing after blessing into their life as a result. It's just the way it is. It's not because I say so. It's because of what God does. So, I have a challenge for you. And understand, this is important. This is important. Because some will say, yeah, well, that guy, he's in charge of the finances at the conference. He wants my money so he can be paid more. Understand that my pay has nothing to do with it, okay? My pay won't go up one penny, whether you tithe or not. But I do have a challenge for you. If you are serious this morning about wanting your faith to become deeper, to really trust God in times of storm as the oceans rage around you, then either commit for the first time, if you aren't already, or recommit to be a faithful steward of God. To return tithes and offerings. To acquire or dispose assets as He directs. And He will pour out blessings for you. The spiritual blessings my wife and I experienced were extreme as we learned that lesson. And by the way, He gave us another house. And He made us back all the money we had ever lost. Because He's a faithful God. And He will do what He says. And whether it's a financial blessing or the other, it will be well worth it. Will you make that commitment with me this morning? Please do. We're going to sing a song together. It's number 309. I surrender all. And as we sing that together, what I want to encourage you to surrender first and foremost, is the desire to be God. And for you to decide what is best.